What happens when America's most beloved late-night host faces off against one of the most controversial figures in modern royalty? You won't believe what unfolds when Meghan Markle sits down with Stephen Colbert, and things go from friendly chat to explosive confrontation in a matter of minutes. This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This is a masterclass in how quickly things can spiral out of control when two strong personalities clash on live television. Before we get into this incredible story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below, because you're not going to believe what unfolds when these two titans of media go head-to-head in what started as a simple promotional appearance. The Late Show studio was buzzing with anticipation as Meghan Markle made her entrance, waving to the audience with that practiced smile we've all seen 1,000 times before. Colbert, ever the professional, greeted her with his trademark warmth. But those who know how to read between the lines could already sense something was off. The handshake lasted just a fraction too long, and Meghan's grip seemed more like a power play than a greeting. "Welcome back to The Late Show. I'm here with Meghan Markle," Colbert announced to thunderous applause, but his usual enthusiasm felt slightly forced. "Thanks for having me, Stephen," Meghan replied, settling into her chair with a kind of calculated poise that screamed media training. "I've been looking forward to this conversation." Right from the start, there was an undercurrent of tension that even the studio audience seemed to pick up on. Colbert dove into the usual pleasantries, asking about her latest projects and charitable endeavors. But Meghan's responses felt rehearsed and defensive. When he mentioned her upcoming book deal, she immediately shifted the conversation to her humanitarian work, as if she was already trying to control the narrative. "You know, Stephen, I think it's important that we focus on the real issues," she said, her voice taking on that lecturing tone that has become her trademark. "There's so much suffering in the world, and I feel like sometimes the media gets distracted by gossip and speculation instead of highlighting the work that really matters." Colbert's eyebrow arched slightly. A tell that regular viewers know means he's about to pounce. "Well, speaking of media attention, you've certainly had your fair share over the past few years. Some of it positive, some of it, well, let's just say controversial. How do you handle the criticism?" The question hung in the air like a loaded gun, and you could practically see Meghan's media-trained facade beginning to crack. Her smile became more forced, her posture more rigid. "I think it's fascinating how people are so quick to judge without knowing the full story," she replied, her voice carrying just a hint of ice. "The British tabloids in particular have been absolutely ruthless, and frankly, I think there are some very troubling patterns in how they cover certain people." "Patterns?" Colbert pressed, leaning forward slightly. "What kind of patterns are we talking about here?" And there it was, the moment when the conversation shifted from promotional puff piece to something much more dangerous. Meghan's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, and she launched into what can only be described as a carefully prepared speech about media bias, systemic racism, and the treatment of women in the public eye. "I mean, let's be honest, Stephen," she said, her voice rising with passion that felt more calculated than genuine. "When you look at how I've been covered versus how other members of the royal family have been treated, there's a clear double standard. And I think we need to call it what it is. It's rooted in some very ugly biases that people don't want to acknowledge." Colbert nodded thoughtfully, but there was something in his expression that suggested he wasn't entirely buying what she was selling. "I understand your frustration. I really do. But don't you think that some of the criticism might be related to specific actions or statements rather than who you are as a person?" The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Meghan's smile disappeared entirely, replaced by a look that could freeze lava. "Specific actions? Like what exactly?" "Like speaking my truth? Like refusing to stay silent when I saw injustice? Like protecting my family from a toxic institution that was never going to accept me anyway?" The audience was dead silent now, sensing that they were witnessing something unprecedented. Colbert, to his credit, didn't back down. "Well, there was the Oprah interview, where you made some pretty serious allegations about racism within the royal family. Some people felt that was." "Some people felt that was what?" Meghan interrupted, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "That it was inappropriate? That I should have just kept quiet and accepted the abuse? That I should have protected an institution that threw me to the wolves?" Colbert held up his hands in a gesture of peace, but his expression showed he was preparing for battle. I'm not saying you should have kept quiet. I'm just wondering if you ever considered the impact of those revelations on the people you were calling out, particularly given that some of them couldn't really respond publicly. That was the match that lit the fuse. Meghan's composure finally cracked completely, and what came next would go down in late-night television history as one of the most uncomfortable moments ever broadcast. Her voice rose to a level that made everyone in the studio shift uncomfortably in their seats. "Are you fucking kidding me right now?" she snapped, causing audible gasps from the audience. "You're asking me to consider the feelings of the people who made my life a living hell? The people who stood by and watched while I was being destroyed by the press? While I was having suicidal thoughts and couldn't get help?" The profanity seemed to shock even Colbert, who had dealt with his share of difficult guests over the years. But this was different. This was raw, unfiltered rage being unleashed on live television. The energy in the room became electric, but not in a good way. It was the kind of tension that makes your skin crawl and your fight-or-flight response kick into overdrive. But this was just the beginning. As Meghan's mask continued to slip, revealing something much darker underneath, it became clear that this interview was about to become something none of them had bargained for. Colbert tried to regain control of the situation, his media training kicking in as he attempted to de-escalate what was rapidly becoming a public relations nightmare. "Meghan, I think we're getting a little heated here. Maybe we should take a step back and—" "Don't you dare patronize me," she cut him off, her voice dripping with venom. "Don't sit there and tell me to calm down when you're the one who started this shit. You invited me here under false pretenses, didn't you? This was never supposed to be about my book or my charity work. This was always going to be an ambush." The accusation hung in the air like toxic smoke. Colbert's face showed genuine surprise, but Meghan was on a roll now, and there was no stopping her. She leaned forward in her chair, pointing an accusatory finger at the host who had built his career on taking down politicians and celebrities with surgical precision. "I should have known better than to trust another white man in media who thinks he can tear me down for ratings," she continued, her words becoming more venomous with each syllable. "You're all the same. You smiled to my face and then tried to destroy me behind my back. Well, congratulations, Stephen. You got your moment. Are you happy now?" The studio audience was completely silent, some looking genuinely disturbed by what they were witnessing. This wasn't the polished, media-savvy Meghan Markle they thought they knew. This was someone unhinged, someone who seemed to be projecting years of frustration and paranoia onto a host who was clearly caught off guard by the intensity of her reaction. Colbert, to his credit, maintained his composure even as the situation spiraled completely out of control. "Meghan, I'm not trying to ambush you. These are legitimate questions that people have been asking for years. I'm giving you a platform to address them directly." "A platform?" she laughed, but it was a bitter, ugly sound that made everyone in the room uncomfortable. "You call this a platform? You call sitting here while you try to gaslight me into admitting I was wrong a platform? This is exactly what they did to me in England. Exactly the same playbook." She stood up suddenly, causing the camera operators to scramble to adjust their shots. The movement was so unexpected that even Colbert flinched slightly. But instead of walking away, she began pacing behind her chair like a caged animal, her hands gesticulating wildly as she spoke. "You want to know about specific actions, Stephen? Let me tell you about specific actions. When I was pregnant with Archie, they were literally discussing how dark his skin might be. When I told them I was having suicidal thoughts, they told me to suck it up because it would be bad for the family's image. When the press was publishing lie after lie about me, they wouldn't even issue a simple statement of support." "But Meghan," Colbert interjected, trying to bring some semblance of order back to the conversation, "you never actually named who said those things about Archie. Don't you think people deserve to know who you're accusing?" That question was like throwing gasoline on a fire. Meghan whirled around to face him, her eyes blazing with fury. "Are you out of your goddamn mind? You want me to destroy specific people so you can have better television? You want me to throw individuals under the bus just to satisfy your audience's bloodlust?" "I'm asking for accountability," Colbert replied, his own voice beginning to show signs of strain. If you're going to make accusations of racism against one of the world's most prominent families, don't you think you owe it to everyone involved to be specific about who said what? Accountability? Meghan's voice reached a pitch that was almost painful to listen to. You want to talk about accountability? Where was the accountability when they hung me out to dry? Where was the accountability when they let the press call me everything but my name? Where was the fucking accountability when they drove me to the point where I didn't want to live anymore? The raw emotion in her voice was undeniable, but there was something performative about it too, as if she had rehearsed this breakdown for maximum impact. The studio lights caught the tears that had started forming in her eyes, but her anger seemed to burn even brighter through them. Colbert was clearly struggling with how to respond. On one hand, he was dealing with someone who was obviously in genuine distress. On the other hand, he was a journalist, and her refusal to provide specifics about such serious allegations was professionally frustrating. I understand that you went through tremendous pain, he said carefully, but when you make public accusations without providing details, it leaves everyone in a difficult position. It creates speculation and rumors that might be even worse than the truth. Worse than the truth? Meghan screamed, her voice echoing throughout the studio. How could anything be worse than the truth? The truth is that they're racists. The truth is that they're a corrupt, outdated institution that protects predators and destroys anyone who threatens their precious image. The truth is that they would rather see me dead than admit they were wrong. The words tumbled out of her mouth faster than she could control them, each one more damaging than the last. This wasn't strategic messaging anymore. This was someone completely losing their grip on reality, lashing out at anyone and everyone who dared to question her narrative. And you know what the real truth is, Stephen? She continued, her voice dropping to an almost whisper that was somehow more terrifying than her screaming. The real truth is that you're just another puppet in their system, another white man who gets paid to tear down women who dare to speak up. You think you're different because you make jokes and smile while you do it, but you're exactly the same as all the rest. The accusation seemed to finally break Colbert's legendary composure. His face flushed red, and when he spoke, there was a hardness in his voice that his regular viewers had rarely heard before. That's completely unfair, and you know it, he said, his words clipped and precise. I've spent my entire career holding powerful people accountable, regardless of their race, gender, or position. I've never been anyone's puppet, and I sure as hell didn't invite you here to tear you down. Then what did you invite me here for? She challenged, moving closer to his desk, with the kind of aggressive body language that made everyone in the room tense up. What was the real purpose of this interview, Stephen? Because it sure wasn't to talk about my book. The confrontation had reached a point of no return. Two massive egos were now locked in combat, each refusing to back down, each convinced they were in the right. The studio audience sat frozen, witnessing what would undoubtedly become one of the most talked-about moments in television history. But as Meghan prepared to unleash what would be her final, most explosive attack, it became clear that this war of words was about to reach its devastating conclusion. Meghan took a deep breath, her chest heaving with barely contained rage, and when she spoke again, her voice carried the kind of venom that could poison an entire room. You know what, Stephen? You want the truth? Here's the fucking truth. You're a coward. You sit behind this desk every night making jokes about people who can't fight back, and you think that makes you some kind of hero. But when someone like me comes on your show and shows you what real courage looks like, you can't handle it. The words hit Colbert like physical blows. His face went pale, then red, as years of professional composure finally began to crack. Real courage? Real courage would be naming the people you're accusing instead of hiding behind vague allegations. Real courage would be taking responsibility for your own actions instead of blaming everyone else for your problems. My problems? Meghan's voice reached a crescendo that made the studio's sound engineers frantically adjust their levels. My problems? You think being driven to suicidal thoughts by a racist institution is my problem? You think having my unborn child's skin color discussed like it's some kind of threat is my problem? She was standing directly in front of his desk now, leaning over it with both hands planted firmly on the surface, invading his personal space in a way that made everyone in the room deeply uncomfortable. The cameras captured every detail of her face, twisted with fury, and something that looked almost like madness. "And you know what else is the truth, Stephen?" she continued, her voice dropping to a menacing whisper that somehow carried to every corner of the studio. "The truth is that you're terrified of me, terrified of what I represent, terrified of a strong black woman who refuses to be silenced. That's why you're trying so hard to discredit me. That's why you invited me here to humiliate me on live television." Colbert stood up abruptly, his chair rolling backward with the force of the movement. For the first time in the entire confrontation, he looked genuinely angry rather than just professionally challenged. "That is absolute bullshit. And you know it. I have never, in my entire career, discriminated against anyone based on their race or gender. I've given you every opportunity to tell your story. And instead, you've turned this into a paranoid rant about conspiracies that exist only in your head." The studio fell so quiet, you could hear the hum of the air conditioning. Even the camera operators seemed to be holding their breath, unsure whether they should keep filming or call security. This had gone far beyond the realm of normal television, entering territory that felt genuinely dangerous. "Paranoid?" Meghan laughed, but it was a sound devoid of any humor, more like the bark of a wounded animal. "Paranoid? I'll show you what paranoid looks like. You think I don't know why you really invited me here? You think I don't know about the conversations you had with your producers? The conversations about ratings and controversy, and how to get me to crack on live television?" Colbert's expression shifted from anger to genuine confusion. "What conversations? Meghan, you're starting to sound completely unhinged. Nobody had any conversations about ambushing you. We invited you here to promote your book, period. This entire meltdown is of your own making." "Liar!" she screamed, slamming her hand down on his desk so hard that his coffee mug jumped and spilled its contents across his notes. "You're all fucking liars. Just like the royal family, just like the British press, just like everyone else who's tried to destroy me. Well, congratulations, Stephen. You got your show. You got your ratings. I hope it was worth it." She straightened up, her breathing heavy and irregular, and for a moment it looked like she might actually physically attack him. The tension in the room was so thick it was suffocating. Security guards had appeared at the edges of the studio, clearly unsure whether to intervene or let the situation play out. Colbert, meanwhile, had reached his breaking point. Years of dealing with difficult guests, hostile politicians, and media manipulation had finally pushed him past the point of professional courtesy. When he spoke, his voice carried the kind of cold fury that was far more frightening than screaming. "You want to know what I think, Meghan? I think you're so used to playing the victim that you can't function any other way. I think you came here tonight looking for a fight because drama is the only way you know how to stay relevant. And I think you've just shown everyone watching exactly why the royal family was probably relieved when you left." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Meghan's face went through a series of expressions: shock, hurt, rage, and finally, something that looked almost like satisfaction. As if she had finally gotten exactly what she came for. "There it is," she said softly, but her voice carried clearly through the studio's microphones. "There's the real Stephen Colbert, not the fake liberal who pretends to care about social justice, not the comedian who hides his cruelty behind jokes. There's the real you, another privileged white man who thinks he can destroy a black woman and get away with it." She stepped back from the desk and straightened her jacket, suddenly looking composed again despite the tears streaming down her face. "Well, you just showed everyone watching exactly who you really are, Stephen, and I hope they remember this moment. I hope they remember that when a black woman tried to tell her truth on your show, you called her crazy and told her she deserved to be rejected by her own family." "That's not what I said, and you know it," Colbert replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Even he seemed to realize that the damage was done, that this conversation had crossed lines that could never be uncrossed. "Isn't it?" Meghan asked, pulling out her phone and holding it up. "Because I've been recording this entire conversation, every word, every insult, every moment where you showed your true colors. And the world is going to see exactly what happens when a powerful white man in media decides to destroy a black woman for sport." The revelation hit the studio like a physical blow. Colbert's face went completely white as he realized the implications of what she was saying. The producers in the control room were probably having simultaneous heart attacks as they calculated the legal and public relations nightmare that was about to unfold. "You can't do that," Colbert said, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is a controlled environment. There are laws about recording." "Are there?" Meghan asked, slipping her phone back into her purse with a smile that was equal parts triumphant and terrifying. "We'll see, won't we? We'll see what the lawyers say. We'll see what the public says. We'll see what happens to your career when people realize you're just another racist hiding behind liberal politics." She turned toward the studio exit, but paused to deliver one final blow. "You know what the saddest part is, Stephen? I actually used to respect you. I thought you were different. I thought you actually cared about justice and equality. But you're just like all the rest. Another white man who thinks he can tear down women like me and face no consequences." "Meghan, wait!" Colbert called out, but she was already walking away, her heels clicking against the studio floor with the rhythm of a funeral march. "This doesn't have to end like this. We can talk about this privately. Work something out." She stopped at the edge of the stage and turned back one final time, her silhouette framed dramatically against the studio lights. "No, Stephen. This ends exactly like this. This ends with me walking away from another white man who thought he could break me. But I'm still standing. And you're the one who's going to have to explain to your audience why you just destroyed your own career on live television." And with that, Meghan Markle walked off the Late Show stage, leaving behind a stunned studio audience, a host whose career might never recover, and a moment of television that would be replayed and analyzed for years to come. The silence that followed her exit was deafening, broken only by the sound of Colbert sinking back into his chair and the whispered conversations of a production crew trying to figure out what the hell they were supposed to do next. The interview that was supposed to be a simple book promotion had become a disaster of epic proportions, leaving everyone involved to wonder how a conversation about charity work and celebrity memoirs had devolved into accusations of racism, threats of legal action, and the complete destruction of two carefully crafted public images. As the studio lights dimmed and the cameras finally stopped rolling, one thing was perfectly clear. This was a night that nobody in that room would ever forget.